All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the March 2nd, 2022 Abington Finance Committee meeting. We are wrapping up our meetings with departments or groups around town. We are going through some other stuff. We have a not light but not too heavy agenda for tonight. We'll be meeting with the Community Preservation Committee. And then we'll be discussing other post-employment benefits, or OPEB. And then we'll go through the status of the upcoming year's budget that we've been working on, and look at if we have warrant articles. When do the warrant articles due, Sonia?
Warrant articles were due on February 13th.
Okay.
I can pull it up on the warrant.
Yep, that would be great. So we'll take our first run through looking at the warrant articles. We'll then go into our regularly scheduled liaison reports, correspondence, and review of minutes. And our next meeting will be next Wednesday, March 9th. We do not have our town manager with us. He is on a vacation this week. Congratulations to him. It's definitely well-deserved. We do have our treasurer collector and finance director, Sonia Hodge, here with us tonight. Those watching the camera can't see her at the moment, but she is here. Let's get right. So we do have 3 members who are hybrid. We are back in the Cotter room at Town Hall for the first time in a while now, but online we have Chris Murphy, Andrew Leveralt, and Barbara Ray. And here in person we have Russ Fuller, myself, Matt Sala, Paul Haggerty, Greg Belazarian, and Daniel Eddy. And now we can kind of get going, and we have the Community Preservation Committee with us. Yeah. I'm getting a thumbs up from Abington Cam, so the podium it is.
Hi everyone, I'm Bruce Hughes. I'm the chair of the CPA committee. And we've got 2 things, we've got a bunch of things, but I'll break it down. I'll start with the special town meeting first. And this is basically housekeeping to correct prior year's votes. So this goes back to fiscal year 2022. Do you have this stuff in front of you, or?
No.
Do I need to read this? Oh, okay.
I think Sonia will
try to
put it up on the screen, and I think
Is this warrants? Is that what it's called?
probably these are your warrant articles.
Yes.
Okay. Yep.
And I have the draft warrant articles in front of me here.
You say warrant articles and draft warrant articles.
Yeah, Liz Shea sent me the draft town meeting warrant articles. And the ones I have in front of me are, like for the special, for example. The one that I have is articles, the ones concerning CPA are articles 3 and 4. And basically article 3 is, the correct prior year's budget. It's first thing that's concerned is $40,000 for restoration of the, I never pronounce this correctly, I'll pronounce it Excedrin, but it's Excedra. That's that thing as you drive into the town hall and library. It's that big, granite surrounded thing that's down there. And I guess it was pretty trashed during the construction of the new high school.
Is this the flagpole area?
Yeah,
Okay.
right down
Yep.
there. The way I explain it is, I paid $5,000 to have a front walk put in my house. So asking $40,000 to do a complete restoration
Yeah.
of that. And
I
as
think
explained to
if I
other people,
remember-
it's always fundraising too.
If I remember correctly, a couple of years ago, somebody ran over a good portion of it with their car. It definitely is a little worse for the wear. So.
And good stonework costs a lot of money.
Yep. Absolutely.
But I know, and as I'll explain with all the things I'll discuss tonight, a significant amount of fundraising has already been taking place for each one of these things. And we've got $40,000 here, and I know it's a lot more than that. So they've gone and gotten grant funds and stuff like that. But anyway, the committee, CPC committee decided that, to allocate $40,000 for that.
How much is it?
But the total cost of the thing,
Yeah.
I have no idea. I'm sorry, I don't. I know that they're just asking $40,000 for us. That's what town meeting will be asked to approve on this item.
Who's asking?
This is the Community Preservation Committee.
They're asking for 40,000, they don't know the cost of it? Just
They
knowing
do,
that it'll be very
no,
expensive.
no, they do
So
know
the-
the cost of it.
So Bruce, correct me if I'm wrong, 40,000 is the Community Preservation Committee's portion
Correct,
of the cost.
correct, thank you.
And the fundraising is covering the other.
Yes, the fundraising, the cost of this thing is covered. They just asked $40,000 from us,
Yep.
all right?
And I will give a quick note for the newer members on the committee and for people who are watching who may not be as familiar with the Community Preservation Committee. You're essentially coming to talk with us about this stuff as a courtesy. You have your own funds and your own budget that are, and the Community Preservation Committee is essentially solely responsible for how those funds get distributed. The town, they're not town general funds, and you have restrictions on percentages of what you're allowed to spend things towards. I think there's
Yeah, for
four or five
example, each one of
different
our
areas,
items here.
But
We
you,
have money
you control
Mhm.
what the funds get used towards on a year-to-year basis. And we
So
just
this
have
is a
that.
courtesy
Yeah.
to you folks, so you have.
Matt, maybe if you could just, for newer people, just have them give an overview of it's a percentage that they get, that we voted on at
Yep.
town meeting,
So
a certain percentage, and then they break down percentages, how much is for open space, how much is for,
Housing, how much is for historical preservation?
Yep, so I believe the percent that we pay to our taxes is 1.5%.
Correct.
And that goes directly to the Community Preservation Fund. And then, what is the breakdown on the percentages of what you're allowed to spend things on? There's open space and
Yeah,
housing.
there's three things primarily, is open, recreation, housing, and historical preservation, but the open space includes recreation.
Yep.
It's open space and recreation.
And so just a few of the things over the last few years that we've spent money on have been, for example, Griffin's Dairy, some of the fields there.
Softball field,
Soft-
Seal School,
Yep.
Beaverbrook Playground,
Yep.
things like that.
So,
A lot of these projects tonight. So anyway, the special, like I say, there was two things. There was the special, and then there was the correct the budget. So those are the things covered under the special. Under the regular town meeting, which the draft article is Article 9, and we have community preservation and expenses, $30,876. Basically, that pays Liz Shea's salary and whatever salary. And then the projects we have this year are Island Grove cleanup, $66,000. That's basically to clean up the invasive plants that have taken over the pond. And I think this is going to be an ongoing thing over the years, to tell you the truth, because, I'm a planter by trade, and, invasive things get in there. They get nutrients from the houses around it and stuff like that, and they go into the pond and they feed those things. So this is going to be a multi-phase chemical application. It's not going to be like we drain the pond. If you've lived in the town a long time, remember, they drained the pond and they dug it all out.
Yep.
And that was pretty terrible. It was like 7 years.
Yeah.
We lost that beautiful pond. But if we don't do this, we're going to lose.
Yeah.
Last year, there was a discolor in that pond. Looked like somebody had poured a can of paint in the pond. I remember that. And it was just this stuff blooming. It was awful. So Island Grove cleanup, 66. Beaverbrook Playground, Phase 3. There's 3 phases to this, and basically 75,000 on this. And basically, this should wrap up the spending on that project. $60,000 for a brand-new snack shack at Island Grove. Highway Department, or Public Works is going to do a lot of work on this thing. It's not like, you're going to have a private contractor work on it. Softball field updates, it's $40,000. Woodsdale Field updates, I guess that's in pretty awful shape, a lot of flooding and stuff like that. And we, decided to give them $40,000. Memorial Bridge, this is $60,000. This basically covers a cost estimate of what it'll take to fix that bridge and to hire a grant writer to get the funding for this thing. And Mount Vernon Cemetery Preservation, Record Preservation. Mount Vernon is a private corporation, we understand that. The records are held at the Dyer Library, and it's a very important resource for people who, are doing family trees and stuff like that. So we thought it was appropriate. We checked the 6 ways to Sunday. Can we spend this money on this thing? And we got advice from state CPA and stuff like that we could spend the money on that. And then, remember a few years ago, we established an affordable housing trust. And again, we're going to give them $100,000. But this is not the only source of money for the Affordable Housing Trust. They've gone out and received other monies. So, so all these are covered by fund balance. The recreation stuff is recreational reserve and fund balance. Historical reserve for the Memorial Bridge. Historical preserve for the town records. Mount Vernon Cemetery records. And then the housing reserve is for the Affordable Housing Trust. So, we get a lot of projects proposed to us. Yep. And, I'll tell you one thing we got was, there's the old fire truck that they had over there. It's privately owned. We couldn't touch it, because it's privately owned. If the town owned it, that'd be one thing. But because it's privately owned, we can't give them money. And they basically wanted, I think it was like $250,000, which would cover the complete cost of it. But if the town gets title to it, we'd be happy to vote some money toward it. But until they do, they're on their own as far as private fundraising and things like that goes. And that's just an example.
For a fire truck?
It's a 1940
antique
fire truck.
Yeah, down the end of Glenowitz.
They estimate total restoration of this thing's going to be probably around $250,000. Well, the thing is like 80 years old.
So how much do they want?
They're not going to get anything from us this time. They asked, I just gave that as an example.
Yep.
Of people who come to us with projects, and we
Yeah, so-
vetted it, and, we determined that it wasn't eligible to be considered for funding.
So there is a process to apply to the Community Preservation Committee for money
Yeah.
for something in town. So
They have to come
people-
before us,
people
and
come
we
to
have to
them
vet it to
with
see
lots
if
of
it's
things.
eligible. And then that's the first phase of it. And then we have to allocate the money that we have for it, if we decide to go ahead with it.
And what's essentially the starting and ending balance for the fund?
Well,
right now?
I think the
Ballpark is
ending
fine.
balance is going to be $70,697,000.
That's the ending balance?
That's the ending balance that we have now. That'll carry over to next year.
Bruce, as far as Woodsdale's for the field up there, who made the request for that?
There's a Woodsdale School Committee.
Okay.
Every one of these, Beaver Brook, the Little League field, they all have people who come in and speak for it. They have community groups, and they do fundraising, and they sell cookies, and, if you're around town, you're always being asked to contribute to these things, which is great. I've lived in this town all my life. I'm happy to contribute to it within reason. But
So is this $40,000? Because, I played Little League up there. And there's always been water there.
Mhm.
That whole area of town so is $40,000 enough to?
well, that's what they're asking us
Okay.
for.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, as opposed to the total cost of the job.
Okay.
All these are amounts of money that are asked for in addition to fundraising. There's a lot of, private fundraising going on for these things. So this is sort of a help to them.
So like that Woodsdale, there's a bigger plan in place than
Yes.
that. So you evaluate it based on where you're not throwing good money at bad.
No.
This is a good project that the town should be supporting.
Yeah, we've seen, a lot of these, we see engineering reports and things like that, They hire engineers, consulting engineers and stuff like that. And I can appreciate that. I've been a city
I was
planner
going to say, I'm sure
35 years.
I'm sure the
so-
planner in you is happy to see
Yeah.
those things.
So as a planner, I'm happy to support
Yeah.
something like this.
And do we get a certain percentage match from the state for the money that we bring in?
Yes.
What's that?
What is the percentage now?
Let me see if I have it over
Because if we had gotten in years earlier.
Yeah, the communities that adopted it right away were getting 100% match
Yeah.
for the first few years. And as more and more towns, so the money comes from a fee that's on, I believe, somewhere in the registry of deeds. And so that money, goes the entire, is kind of held by the state, and towns, when they adopt the Community Preservation Act, get matching funds from the state to a percentage of what they're raising themselves.
I'm looking at sheets that I have here.
Nice.
I'm just seeing the carried over from last year, and then the amounts that were voted, and then I see, what the balance of the amount is, which I've just carried over from last year, for example, was $30,876. And fund balance from 2022 was $295, blah, 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 blah. But anyway, it's lots of pots of money for this. We have an excellent secretary who helps us figure out all this stuff and keeps us on track with this. So are there any guys have any other questions?
Chris, Andrew, Barbara, anybody online have questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you very much. Appreciate all the work you guys do.
Well, it's a committee I really, I've been on the planning board for 24 years. I enjoy that. But I really enjoy being on CPA because it really, when you see a sign like up at Griffin's Dairy that said CPA funding was used to help restore this, and it's a resource that so many people use. It's really neat to see that, and I worked for Old Colony Planning Council for 30-odd years, and going around to the 15, 16 towns that they have, and seeing the signs for the CPA projects. And it was so cool, I thought, when the Abington started doing that, because it just gives people a sense that the money is going for good causes. And I really think the CPA is really a good cause for the money to go to. And, it's just a reflection on the money that we get from the state on the real estate sales and things like that, so it helps. All right.
Anyone else with questions? Yes. Chris?
No, thanks. No,
Andrew?
good, thank you.
All right.
All right.
Bruce, thank you so much for your time. We really
Thanks so much
appreciate
for your
it.
time. Appreciate it. Thanks for
Yeah.
thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me come before you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you for
Have a
coming.
good night.
You too. All right. Next item up for bids. OPEB. We have our Town Finance Director, Sonia Hodge, coming
That's where the fun starts.
to really dig in with us.
Remember, there's an acronym.
And I'll point out it was Chris Murphy who really had kind of started the request on this to get us a better idea of where we stand with OPEB. So Chris, thank you for putting this on the agenda and getting this rolling.
I was just following up on Paul's question.
Don't blame me, Chris.
Oh, great. So this is a short presentation, and I'll also reference some of the questions that Chris sent over. So when we talk about OPEB, other post-employment benefits, there's really two parts to it. There's the liability that we are on the hook for as people retire and they take our health and life insurance. And then there's also the funding of the liability, and both of those are really important pieces, and you can't talk about one without the other. So first I'll talk about the liability. And the liability, the basis of it really is these are the health and life premiums that the town is paying for retirees who are eligible for a pension either with the Plymouth County Retirement System or Mass Teachers Retirement System. And there are a lot of different things that can factor into our total liability. Part of it is the census, our demographics of our retirees. The younger they are, the longer we expect them to be on our plan, and therefore the more expensive it will be on the whole. So they look at ages, they look at our claims, they're looking at all different types of things, which we do have a slide here. So they're looking at gender, age, years of service, what department they're in, police versus town employees versus teachers. That all comes into play.
Sonia, just could you move the mic closer? The
that
people
better?
online are having trouble hearing.
Is that better?
Barbara, Chris, Andrew, is that better for hearing Sonia?
Talk for a minute, Sonia.
Okay. So what I was saying is they're looking at all the different demographics
Yeah, that's
of our
better.
group. Okay.
Yeah.
So they're looking at age, gender, and department. So public safety would be treated differently from teachers, which would be treated differently from town employees. They're also looking at our health plan design and the benefit structure. They're looking at, all of those things come into play when you're talking about the premium cost. So they're looking at that too, because obviously if we're paying $100 for a plan versus $800 for a plan, that is a huge difference and will definitely impact the liability. They're also looking at the number of folks that we have who are not eligible for Medicare and therefore would be on an active plan. And when I say active plan, I mean a plan that an active employee would be on. So something that I'm taking, if they're over 65 and they're not eligible for Medicare, they would stay on that plan. And those plans are obviously more expensive and they directly impact our rates for the town. They have encouraged us to participate in a Medicare buy-in program. And what this means is it takes those folks and moves them on to Medicare and pays those Medicare premiums on their behalf along with the penalties. That way, we're moving them off of the active plans and moving them on to more cost-effective Medicare plans. It reduces our claims in the long run, reduces our premiums in the long run, and therefore it impacts our liability.
Who was it that encouraged us to?
Our actuary.
Okay.
So the folks that are doing our valuation for us, they've encouraged us to do that. We have been looking at health insurance quotes the last couple of weeks. We've met with our insurance advisory committee, and the plan that we're most interested in moving to actually has a Medicare buy-in program, and they would assist us in all of the legwork in getting that set up and moving those people. So this is something that we're hoping that we can implement very soon in the next fiscal year, assuming this is the direction we go. Another thing that comes into play is how much we actually pay for the premium. So right now we pay 75% for all of our retirees' health care premiums. Some towns do 50-50. We do 75%. This is not something that's bargained. This is something that the town decides. I don't know for sure if that's something that has to go to town meeting, but it's not something that has been discussed. Obviously that's a big decision to make when this impacts our retirees' bottom lines. So it's not something we would do unless we absolutely had to. The contribution rate changes if the retired employee passes away and their spouse remains on our plan. At that point, then the share does go to 50-50. But while the retiree is alive, it's 75-25. The discount rate is the estimated interest rate that they're assuming we'll get on the funds that we have in our OPEB trust. And so if you're thinking about the time value of money, money now is worth less than it will be worth in 10 years, and so you don't have to pay as much now if you're not going to take it out for 10 years. And so that's kind of where how much will you be gaining over those 10 years is what the discount rate is. Right now we have a very low discount rate. I think our discount rate should be lower since we're not investing these funds, but that we'll get to, and we do have plans for that. The last thing would be medical care cost inflation. That's not something we can control, obviously, other than encouraging our members to be as healthy as possible, because that would reduce our claims over time. But that's kind of out of our hands. I threw in a couple of charts from our valuation. I also have the valuation, so if we want to jump over to that, we can. The big part is our unfunded liability is almost $95 million.
Can you just explain that?
That is the cost of health and life insurance for our retirees for the foreseeable future based on our current active employees and how long we expect them to be on our retiree plans, plus our existing retirees.
Was 94 million like sort of in perpetuity?
Yeah. Mhm.
Right, so you say it sort of never ends, right?
Kind of, but
Yeah.
if you get a fund set up and it's large enough, you're earning interest all the time, and it's kind of funding itself at that point. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we're always going to be paying insurance premiums for our retirees. It's not like we're going to fund all of this and then we never have to put anything into it again. We will still
And it's
have ongoing,
It's
but
also not like there will come a point where we don't have any retirees
Correct.
who are on
Right.
our health
And
insurance.
what do we have? We don't have 94 million.
we do not have 94
Right, so
million.
what do
We have $274,000 in our trust fund right now.
So it's close.
0.29%.
Yes. Our funded ratio is 0.3%.
It's unfunded.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's a big unfunded.
And
It
has
is.
it been, obviously, I mean, I don't need to keep track of it, has it been unfunded forever?
Yeah, this hasn't really been on the radar until more recently when GASB made their new rules that requires us to put the liability on our financial statements. That's really when it started to become more in our mind's eye about it, that we need to address this. Before, it was just one of those things that you just pay it every year. You know, you pay the
That's what I was
current
gonna
year's
ask, like,
cost.
It's something
What
that,
do we do?
so Greg, it's something that we have been factoring into the budget year after year
Yeah,
after year
alright.
after
Mhm.
year for kind of the history of the town.
So
We
it's-
try, like, in good years when we have free cash and we have money left over, we've tried to put money both to stabilization and into the OPEB account. That's why there's something in the OPEB account.
Yeah.
But most of the time, it's just paid out of the yearly budget.
Right. So typically, we pay the current year's cost in the current year, and that's it. Several years ago, I think right around the time I was hired, maybe just before, is when the OPEB trust was approved at town meeting. And so it is still relatively new. And we'll get more into the funding part soon, but this is really kind of showing you, you know, you can see the current active employees, they're estimating $50 million, $50 million cost, and their retirees, $45 million.
It's definitely going to sound like a crazy question.
Probably.
Right now,
Right.
could we take out a loan for 94 million?
We don't need 94 million.
No, I
right
know.
now.
No.
100%, I just want to know if we can do it.
So that would be similar to like a pension obligation bond, and those are generally risky and not recommended
Are they
unless
low,
the
right?
circumstances are perfect, because you're really playing a game with the market.
Well, that's what I was
You're,
going to ask if we think about playing the game.
no, not for a
Is it
town like,
illegal?
not for a town like Abington. What would happen is, and I'm not an expert on pension obligation bonds, so don't quote me on any of this, but I did see a webinar on it this summer. When you're taking out a pension obligation bonds, you're banking on earning more interest than you're going to be paying. If you get that wrong, if the market goes down, which some cities have done this, and the market goes down, you are then taking money out of your operating budget to make those debt payments. And so you end up paying more than you would
Are we
have.
already doing that?
We're not funding the liability right
No,
now.
I'm saying, like, aren't we already taking the money out of
So
our
we're taking money out to pay the benefits. We're
Oh, I
not
know.
taking,
Yeah.
we're not taking money out
I'm
to
saying-
pay the
know,
interest,
yeah.
the interest on the debt and also pay for the benefits because the fund has gone down.
There's
so
an
that we
entire
can-
business that functions off of this, literally
Yeah.
just borrowing and selling it a different thing or investing and making the middle. Listen, I don't know what the rates are for 94 million.
It's just risky in general. You know, when the rating agencies talk to us about it, they ask if we've considered it, because that to them is, I mean, they have to factor that in. If we're looking at doing a pension obligation bond or something like this, that would definitely be something that they would raise a red flag for them, because it is risky. I know Brockton just did a pension obligation bond. I don't know how that's going, but I think that's still relatively new for them. But
Or even 30 million, or whatever, I don't know, I'm just saying, like, there's a good, I'm assuming we get good rates, and rates aren't gonna be 10%. I mean, if you could make a 1 or 2% off the 30, 40, 50 million bucks, it's a pretty good number every year, just for doing it.
With these numbers here, one would think that we'd be able to see potential obligations year to year. Can we see that now, or?
See,
Like, so if we had to, if our obligation was, I don't know, 250,000 last year, and we've been paying it as it comes up?
yeah, so last year our total obligation was 2.2 million
Okay.
for our retiree health care. Right.
But so with the numbers here, though, I feel like we'd be able to kind of forecast year over year
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and get an idea of what's to come.
That's in the chart, isn't it?
Is it?
Yeah, so the service cost is kind of what they expect you to pay every year.
Okay, it's broken out by
Mhm.
year, so it doesn't grow at all? It's
It does.
average?
Yep. Let's see, I can pull up another.
But it's like 3%, right?
And Chris, the chart's really far away for us right now.
You also have it
Oh, it's in this sheet.
in the handout in front of you, and for my eyes, it's kind of small. My eyes are not what they were when I was, say, 45.
It's still a little small here. That's right, it's better.
So I don't know if there's a chart that just has the service cost in it,
3%.
but
All right, so that answers my question. That's the projected number year over year.
It's guaranteed product for. So this is the office and they, but.
okay, so this does have the service cost here. Column V here on the screen. So for 21, the service cost was 2.9 million, 22, 2.6. I'm not sure why it would go down. Fiscal year 23, 2.7. So this is the what they, if in a perfect world, this is what we would be paying every year.
Those numbers being discounted at 3.5% according to the chart.
Say that again,
Sorry.
Chris? Chris, could you say that again?
Yes.
According to the chart, the discount rate is 3.5%.
So let me see. Here's the one with the 2.25. Thank you.
At least the alternate one that I'm looking at.
Yeah. Okay. So this one has the 2.25 discount rate where we're at now.
Oh, okay.
So that does change it. Thank you.
Are we setting aside the earned amount for the people who are working now that they earn this year? Are we setting that into the fund?
No.
Or are we not setting that aside either?
No. Traditionally, historically, what has been done is they've taken a percentage of free cash and put it aside to the OPEB trust. They've taken 10% of free cash, and 4% of that, or I'm sorry, I'm sorry. It's been a few years since we've actually added a significant number to the OPEB, but it worked out to be like 4% of free cash that we're moving to OPEB, which is insignificant when you look at the total liability, but it was something.
Yeah.
When Scott and I have been reviewing financial policies, this is something that's going to be in there, of having an actual percentage of our either free cash or the budget or something that's going to go in every year. You know, right now, we have to keep in mind that we're also trying to fund our pension liability, and we are required to do that. That's where most towns are focusing their funding right now. We are supposed to be fully funded on our pension in 2031. Looking at that schedule, the payments get very, very large those last couple years. I would not be surprised if we end up expanding that schedule out maybe to 2035 or 2040 even. But I think a lot of discussions are, you know, once we fully funded our pension, we will no longer have $3+ million that we're paying towards the pension system. And the idea would be then, at that point, we can revisit the financial policies to move some of that money into the OPEB instead. But OPEB, there is no requirement that you fund this, and I'll show another chart in a few minutes that can compare the other towns, and we're in good company.
But when do you anticipate that retirement coming fully funded, though, to say, oh, we can now start funding? Because
Well-
in the last 2 years, it went up $14 million, liability. At this rate,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to slow down either.
I'm not saying that I think our payments to the retirement system are going to be zero. That's not going to be the case. They will decrease. I think what will probably happen, and this is all just conjecture, just looking at numbers, is I predict that we'll probably extend our payment schedule with Plymouth County, and I think the county would be doing this. This would be something that all the treasurers would need to vote. Extend that payment schedule out 5 years or so. Once we get to that point and we're funded, I think the contribution rates are probably going to change so that we're paying a little bit more every year and the employees are not paying quite as much. Because right now we're paying a couple percentage points on payroll for our normal cost, and the employees are paying 7, 8, 9, 10, 11% on their wages. So I think that we'll probably even that out a little bit more. Again, that has not been discussed. I don't know that that's the case, but I can't imagine we'll suddenly go to where the town hardly pays anything and the employees are paying all of their pension. I just don't see that happening. Yes.
Greg?
The 75% thing?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever run the numbers on 50? Is
We have not. No.
it easy?
Well, so if we're paying 75 now and we went to 50, then it would be a 30%, 33% cut. So I would imagine roughly a third of this would go away.
50 and 90 or
Yeah.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So just looking at the chart, right now we're in 2021, we paid benefits, as you go, of
Mhm.
2.3
So that's
million,
that's
right?
going to be this number
2,362.
here. So
We paid
this,
those, go ahead, sorry.
that's okay. So this 2.362 number, this is what they're
Yes.
saying we've paid for health and life benefits for retirees in fiscal year 21. Now, this number is not, this kind of has an actuarial element to it. Part of the 2.16 million is what we actually paid in premiums. The additional 200,000 there is an estimated figure for what, and there's actually a term for this, for what it's a subsidy, for what the active plans are subsidizing for the retirees. So remember, we're
Yeah.
talking about there are some folks who are on active plans who are over 65 because they're not eligible for free Part A Medicare. What happens is they're
But-
paying the same rate
Yes,
as everybody
but
else.
in 10 years, we'll be paying like 3.6 million.
Right.
If we just leave things the way we are, we don't fund it, we'll be paying 3.6, which is, about 50% increase over 10 years, which is, 5% a year, something like that, which is faster than our budget is growing. But that's where the problem is.
Right,
Is
and
that
that's
if
true
you do
for
pay
our,
as you go, and you keep adding people,
yep.
Right.
Yeah, and
you're
that's
gonna
true.
get behind.
That's true for our active plans. Our active plan premiums typically go up faster than our overall budget does every year.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't even count. I assume this has an assumption for the growth in premiums, things like that.
Well, so this column is the premiums for the year.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So
The
any funding would be in addition to that.
other observation I have is there are 762 people in the program. About half of those retirees and half of those are still active. So that unfunded liability is over $100,000 apiece. That's the present value of the benefit that we're going to pay these people after they retire.
Mm-hmm.
How much?
Over 100,000 apiece.
That's just an observation. I'm not saying that that's good or bad. It's just a fact. I think. Maybe it's a question, not a fact, but.
Benefits are very
Because I see
expensive, no matter how you look
410
at it.
active people, 352 retirees currently. So,
Is there any type of a board associated with this trust?
No.
And we've never invested, we just have that 274 sitting in cash?
Yeah, so let's move forward to the funding. Let's see. All right, so some of the things we need to think about when we're talking about funding it is, one, we need a funding schedule. How much are we going to fund every year? And where is that money going to come from? Is it going to come from free cash? Is it going to come from the operating budget? Those are, or somewhere else. Those are considerations we have to take into account. And then there's the actual investment of the funds. Procurement law requires that we go out for an RFP. We have to get requests for proposals. The law states that if you have at least $50,000 in a fund or an account that's being managed by someone other than the treasurer, you have to do an RFP. Now that includes bank accounts, and I can tell you that no town is going out to open up a savings account. They're not doing an RFP. The law says you're supposed to, but when I've talked to investment managers or other town treasurers, no one says you need to do an RFP for OPEB trust investments.
yes.
I am on the side that that's what the law says, so that's what we're going to do. There's a reason for that, to make sure that we're not doing something we're not supposed to, that we're getting the best rates. I mean, it's hard because no one can quote you a rate, right? They can tell you what's earned in the past, but it forces someone to go through the process. Now, we started a process similar to this before I realized that procurement law requires an RFP, and we did interviews with groups, and we were ready to make a decision in March of 2020, and then COVID hit and the markets tanked, and we decided now may not be the best time because we're all working from home now, and then we realized that we needed to do an RFP anyway, and no one does RFPs, and I have not had time to sit down and try to come up with what an RFP would look like for OPEB funding because, frankly, I can't find one. So it would be something we'd have to create from scratch. With that said, it's something that Scott and I agree needs to happen, but it needs to happen in conjunction with a funding schedule and a funding source, because getting a higher interest rate on very little money isn't really all that helpful, in my opinion. So we have to combine it with actually getting money in the trust and funding it, which of course is a challenge because we don't have a whole lot of extra money sitting around to do it.
Because getting money is a challenge.
That's the challenge, right?
Can we get a copy of the trust document?
There's not really a trust document. It was approved at town meeting to open a trust. That's all there is. The law has changed since that was voted, and so part of what we would do when we do this RFP is our new investment fund manager would help us create a trust document, like a real one. They would help us decide on an investment policy so that all investment decisions would go back to this policy. So I would not be able to say, you know what, I'm feeling good this month, we're going to increase our aggressiveness and we're just going to throw it all into whatever. I wouldn't be able to do that because it would be against the document, the policy. And often there would be some sort of an investment committee. Not required. Some towns do, some towns don't. Sometimes it's just the treasurer and the town manager who make those decisions. But there could also be a committee. It would depend on town by town how they want to handle it. Yep. And the policy would decide how conservative we are, how aggressive we are. A lot of towns, when they start these, they start out more conservative because they're kind of feeling the waters to see how it goes, get more comfortable with it, and then they start to move more aggressive. Personally, I'd rather start out a little more aggressive because these are long-term funds, and these are one of the very few funds that the town can invest with a more aggressive stance. Most of our funds, where we're allowed to invest them, we are very limited in what we can do with them because the safety of the funds is the primary concern, not the yield, if that makes sense. So we have more latitude with these funds. So my preference would be to be a little more aggressive, start getting those interest returns now as we're funding it and building it up to get in a better place. Yes.
This might be a really good question. Can we sell like bonds or anything?
You just asked that question.
Bonds, can we sell them?
Yeah, that's the same question you asked before.
I did.
Yeah.
I mean,
To borrow?
could be on, well, yeah, that's a little different.
Is this, no, it's the same.
Sure.
So if the town borrows, we sell bonds.
Oh, all right, I thought you don't, I could just go to a bank.
No.
That's what I was talking about when I was saying.
No, oh, no, we don't do that. No, towns are very different. So if we need to borrow, we issue bonds, municipal bonds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great. Well, because don't we go to banks for other stuff? That's why I'm asking.
We'll do bond anticipation notes, and those go through a financial advisor, and those are different from like an equity line at a bank or a traditional loan. Those really are not available to towns, and if a town does go through those, again, that's something that often the rating agencies see as a red flag. They're seen as more risky.
One other observation, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're saying 93 million unfunded liability. But the fact is that 2.3 million that we're paying in benefits, the benefits that we're paying this year, that's part of the 93. So, in our budget, if we just kept that level, and it probably will increase, that's actually covering part of the 93. So the 93 billion is somewhat overstating what we think our problem is, because we're already paying $2.3 million a year of those benefits. Is that
The only
correct?
thing that I would disagree with you there is that I think our discount rate is too high in these reports, and so I think our liability is actually higher, if we're being honest.
Yeah, but
But I
still,
think Chris's point is that if you're factoring in that
Current year.
we are paying it year to
for the
year.
benefits as
Yes.
we go is
And that-
actually eating into, it's covering some of what that 93 million present value is.
Yes, that's true. We're just not getting any benefit of the discount rate because we're not really
That's
putting
right.
anything
Correct.
aside.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, yep.
So I'm just trying to make it so that people see the 93 million number, and they're right to worry, but it isn't quite as
Dire.
clear cut that it's 93 million.
It's only
really
91, it's okay.
93
Yeah,
million.
well, it's
But at
not-
a discount rate, 0.3, that we're in our budget every year.
Yeah, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but the point you're making is, it's not that we have an outstanding bill for $93 million.
Correct.
This is something
Yes.
projected out over a lengthy period of time.
Over the life of our current and retired employees.
Yeah.
Which we
So-
hope
and-
is a very long
And
time.
our current not retired employees.
Right, current
Our
active and
current
retired.
active employees. So someone who
Everybody.
was hired, if we
Yesterday.
hired someone yesterday, we're projecting to the end of their life
Yes.
as part of this.
But those retirees aren't contributing anything towards this.
Our current retirees, I mean, they pay their share of the premiums, but their share is not impacted here. It's totally separate.
Right.
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 Yeah.
So that's why they put the trust in place, so you could actually,
So we could start funding it.
exactly,
Mhm.
right, to help offset the
Exactly.
rising costs of this.
Yep.
Mhm.
If we don't fund
Yes.
the trust, we're, like, the hit to the town is just gonna continue to grow.
Yes.
Correct.
And
Right.
to me, it is dire. We do have to do something about it, because we
It
can't,
is. Yep.
I mean, Gatsby's we've had to report this since 2007. I don't know when the trust was set up. That's 15 years. We've got $274,000 in there on a $94 million liability. It is a problem, and we're not alone with it.
No, we're not.
I mean,
And
it's bad.
Let's see.
There are
So,
some towns that haven't funded anything. They're a goose egg.
so this report was
Some others
released
even
recently.
have lower benefits, but I don't, Whitman, for instance, their benefits seemed a lot lower, but I don't know why.
Yeah, that I don't know. This report has all of the cities and towns in the Commonwealth, and it shows their liability, their funding, and their ratio. So we're always first in line here. So you can see that few towns are very well funded. There are a few who are Surprisingly, see, I thought a larger city would have more ability to start funding these, but I found that the ones that are close to fully funded are really, really tiny towns.
Say the larger cities also have a much higher.
They have a much higher, but I can't imagine that small towns have a huge amount of extra cash either, though. So, but that's what I found when I went through here, that the higher funding ratios are the smaller towns.
I guess Long Meadow is.
Long Meadow, I don't know. Let's
They're
look.
always the highest tax rate. So.
If I remember correctly, you said.
No, not
covered
quite.
this on cash.
Yes, so far, all of our funding towards this trust has come from free cash.
Have there been time, and I know why it's like totally focused on this now, but have you guys talked about, and I don't know how this would work, but line items and.
Putting it in the budget. So we have talked about having it as something in the budget that would grow every year, and that is something that the actuary doesn't really care how it happens, but they have talked about funding. And this chart here actually shows what they recommend we fund. Start with 430,000 and then have it increase every year. That's obviously something that we've talked about as well. But yeah, some towns do have it in their budget. hmm So it's an option. It's legal, absolutely.
And you obviously look at this and the, education department is a huge part of this.
Well, they're our biggest department,
Right.
absolutely. Yep. And so that's one of the fixed costs that the town pays. So, the town pays the debt, the health insurance, the life insurance, all of the pension. Well, teachers don't have pension in the town budget, but we pay all of these costs on their behalf, and so that's kind of why, funding is split the way it is. Yep.
Chris, you look like you have a question.
No, I don't. This was answered the questions that I had asked in the email, so it was very good. Thank you.
We definitely appreciate this information.
It's a lot to think about, and these are huge numbers, and it's not something that we'll tackle immediately, but, when Scott and I were talking about this, really ever since he started, and that's why he always makes the comment that Sonia's always going to tell me to put it in OPEB, because it comes up all the time that we got to do this. It's going to be a financial policy that will be voted by the Board of Selectmen, and then we've got to make a decision on when we can get an RFP out, find the time to write the document, get it out, and get it started. And there are, 2, 3, 4 major investment firms in the state that work with municipalities who are excellent at what they do and well respected. And I'm imagining that one of those would probably be who we would end up going with. But it would really depend on the results of the RFP. We would go into it with eyes wide open and lots of questions for everybody. No decisions have been made on obviously who we would go with. But, the gains are there if we can get it set up.
And when are these financial policies going to be reviewed and approved?
I'm not sure when they're going to be approved. I'll have to ask Scott.
The interesting part about that is, like you said, it just kind of goes down.
It's never going to go down.
Much like health insurance is not being
Yeah.
No, I know, but the problem is there are cycles. Things do go down, so if we don't,
right.
it's just, we're always planning for it to go up.
Yeah, there's no good answers to this. I don't envy what you and Scott have to do to deal with this, but I just worry that, like, if we have a tool with the trust to possibly help offset some of the increases,
Right.
we're not taking advantage of it.
Right.
And it's just how do you get that
How do we get
base?
to the point where we're taking advantage of it?
Right,
Right.
right.
That's the challenge.
Right.
So we'll get this $1 million in marijuana revenue coming out this year.
Millions.
Millions.
Thank you.
Millions.
I completely agree. The question is that where it's going?
It's been a conversation of using the marijuana money for this. So yeah, that's definitely been something that we've talked about. That was my first comment when we knew that we were going to have a retail shop and start seeing some of this money. It was like, why don't we use it for our OPEB funding? It's, we're not missing it right now. So that's definitely been what we've talked about. Not quite that much. I think we're estimating to get over 300,000 this year.
The alternate chart, the alternate contribution chart.
Yes.
Is that showing us that if we pay about 500 to 600,000 a year extra above the benefits that we're paying into the trust, that will, again, you can worry about whether the interest rates are right, the discount rates, but based on this assumption, that we'll catch up by, in 20 years or so? Is that what that's showing us?
Well, no, not really.
By 22.
So in 2057, we'll be funded at 31%. So no, it's not showing that we would be fully funded. This is kind of a meet us where we are. This is what we recommend you start doing as a minimum. Does that make sense? So on this last line here,
Yeah.
that's where our funded ratio would
Yeah.
be.
All right, I'm just trying to figure out what that alternate presentation is trying to show us, because there we are funding the trust. I don't see what, in it, I'm seeing the trust contributions beyond pay-as-you-go, but,
And so this column here is our funded ratio, like how much of our liability is funded. And you can see that with those additional contributions, the funded
Okay,
ratio
yeah.
goes up year over
Okay.
year.
All right, never mind.
But we would have to contribute a lot more than that to get to fully funded.
Very similar to Johnstone talking about the money we put to paving the roads in town.
Mhm.
We have to contribute more into that to get all of the roads paved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You better do 10 parallel steps. Just 5.
All right.
Tangential question, where do we stand with the other licenses for marijuana shops? We haven't gotten
It's a
them.
great question that I don't think I would have the answer to. The last update I heard when we did our continuing disclosure was that we're expecting 2 of the businesses to come online in fiscal year '23. I don't know what area of the business they are, if they're cultivation, distribution, or retail, but that's what Scott had estimated. Yeah, and so then the other 2 we're still expecting would be in the permitting process still.
Other questions?
Let's see, I had one more.
No, I'm good.
Oh, this is all that was.
Thank you.
So what are the next steps then the town's taking?
Funding policy and the financial policies. That's going to be one of our first steps, and then getting the RFP written and issued. Once the RFP is issued and we select an investment manager, they'll assist us with getting the trust document and the investment policy written and approved so that we can start investing the funds in whatever method the town decides is best for Abington.
And when do we think that those policies are going to be in effect? Realistic.
Realistically, maybe this time next year. I mean, it takes some time. We got to do the policies. We've got to do the RFP. We have to work with the investment manager to get all the documents up. Maybe sooner, hopefully sooner, but 6 months at the earliest, I would think.
Want to allocate more funds to actually have a good amount of money to invest.
And that would be part of the financial policies that the Board of Selectmen would need to approve.
Who's the investment manager?
Whoever we decide to choose in the RFP. So it would depend on who responds. And there are options we can do there. Plymouth County works with a group that just does OPEB funding. That's all they do. And there are other groups who do all municipal investing. And so when we had originally interviewed folks, we interviewed the OPEB only people, and then we also interviewed the others because we were also interested in investing our stabilization money and our trust funds that we're now holding. All of this is just held in a cash account, and it's not the best way to do it. So we were looking at all of our long-term accounts moving those into an investment manager. So that's a consideration too, is if you go with someone who just does OPEB, get this set up now, and then we'd have to go with someone else, do a different RFP, go with someone else for everything else. Or we go with a firm that can do all of it.
Do the policies consider the contribution rates?
No. No, the financial policies that we're working on now would just be the town's contributions to the trust. Yep. Like I said, we have not brought up or discussed changing the contribution rates for our retirees. That would impact their pockets
Oh, absolutely, right.
significantly.
Right.
Yeah.
But the contribution rate hasn't always been 75% in town. That was a change. I mean, it was many years ago, but it
Yeah, I
wasn't
don't
always
know.
75%.
I imagine it was higher.
No, I think it was 50.
Oh, it went up?
I thought it went up, yeah.
Okay. I don't know. That was long before me.
Because I remember years ago being at a town meeting, and it was like, and they were questioning, it's like, oh, because the rates were low back then.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, yeah, that's a nice little benefit to that. And it's like, oh, let's give it to them. And then all of a sudden, now healthcare's through the roof, and it's like,
Oh,
all right, well, we didn't plan for this.
right.
And now it's to try to take something away, because you're right, it impacts
Mm-hmm.
their pocket.
Right.
So to cover the cost this year would be a hit to free cash?
Yeah, if we wanted to add additional to the trust, it would likely come out of the free cash that we have.
You covered the cost for the free cash too, right?
No, so the actual cost of the premiums, as the bills come in, we're paying it out of our town budget.
So that's
Mhm.
factored into the budget
Yep.
the budget that we're currently on for fiscal year '22, but also it's factored into the budget we're preparing.
Yeah, that's a good question, because that health insurance line item that we have in the budget, the $7 million, that's for our active employees and our retirees. Mhm. What else?
And how funded is our retirement? What percentage we at?
Oh, that's a good question. I can tell you. Let's see.
Also, I'm just looking that up, just making sure, Andrew, do you have any questions? I want to make sure you got a chance.
No, I am good. Thank you, though.
Russ, anything else?
No.
Okay, so just about 62, 63%. And so this is what I'm talking about when I talked about how the cost, the employer cost, I mean, it just balloons to get us mostly fully funded by the end. Now, state law says it has to be done, I think, by 2040. Originally, I think it was 2030, and then it got extended, but Plymouth County did not vote to extend it. And this is why I'm thinking, I mean, we can't afford 60% of payroll in 1 year. So I just don't see that actually happening.
Is that what you're saying, you're going to extend out?
That's why I think that this would be extended at least a few more years. I think you'd have to at least do it 5 more years. We'd still be within the statutory requirements, but it would allow the cities and towns in Plymouth County to actually do it.
And Sonia, how much would we have to have at that time?
So this isn't broken down by town, but it's 58.5% of our payroll, whereas right now it's 29% of payroll. So it would be double. So right now it's 3.2 million, 3.3 million. So
And that's the one that.
I'm guessing over $6 million at least, because salaries are only going to rise, so probably 6.5 million. I just don't see us being able to do that.
And that's the $3 million like July 1st, when you get it sent out.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. I get questions
Thank
on
you.
this every now and then. Someone will find this schedule and they'll say, oh, at 2030, 2031, we're going to have all this money in the budget. We can do whatever we want with it. I'm like, slow down. It's not going to happen that way.
Quite.
It would be nice, but it's not going to. And then you can see here, after the towns are paying less than 2% of payroll towards our pensions, whereas employees are paying, I'm paying 11,000, or I'm sorry, 11% of my wages. So I just don't see that we would force all employees to pay 11%. The towns are paying less than 2.
Oh, if we paid 60 the year before.
Yeah,
Yes.
And that's sort of
yeah.
And I think.
So I think when we get around these years, I think there's going to be a lot of changes to this.
the, I can't imagine you could do 60%.
I don't know how we would. We'd have to borrow. I mean, there's no way we could do that.
And you said you can push it out to 2040?
By state law, yes. But this would be something that the Plymouth County retirement system, and I think the treasurers of the Plymouth County would have to vote in place.
Assuming the other towns are in the same sort of agreement.
Oh, yeah, because we're all on the same schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't think we have much choice.
Right.
yeah. We get asked this by the bond rating agencies, too. What are you going to do?
Any other OPEB questions?
I guess I'm just, like, where do we go from here? Like, when will we hear back on anything? What's the Board of Selectmen gonna do about it? How's Scott working with them?
I can find out if he has an update on that.
Much appreciated.
It really does jump out that fast.
Yeah.
Chris, thanks again for bringing it up. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you
I'm
for-
going to take off now.
I was going to say thank you for joining
Yeah.
from your trip.
Couldn't have done it
All right.
without
To go
you.
over this,
Thank
we
you.
appreciate your time.
Bye, Chris, thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, Chris. All right.
Chris drops like a depressing calm on everybody.
Have a good night, everyone.
He jumped on from vacation to be part of this, so I appreciate his commitment to this, so. All right. So from that, we move to where we stand with the fiscal year '23 budget.
I don't have any big updates for you. I told you that we were looking at health insurance quotes. So that's, right now we've spoken with all of our union members, well, all of our union reps. We believe that we're all on the same page and we're interested in a group that would actually give us a flat rate increase, which is something that's obviously very attractive, but there are other considerations to take into account, primarily how it impacts our people, because they are the ones that would be impacted 100%. So we're still in discussions. We want to make sure that we're all on the same page. I think when Scott gets back next week, we'll be able to go ahead and move forward with that, but we want to kind of give everybody time to think about it some more before we just rush in and start signing off on the proposal. What that means is we might have a little extra money in the budget for fiscal year '23, and so some of the things that we were not wanting to do or not able to do may be back on the table. I mentioned maybe we put something in the budget for OPEB, so that's on the table as well. Nothing is off the table. We talked about, from our meeting, we were speaking about the public health nurse. Our plan would be to put that back in the budget so that it's not grant funded. I know that was a concern of the group, and so Scott thinks that that would be a good idea to go ahead and move her salary back into the general fund budget to protect it. We're still doing negotiations with police, fire managers, and DPW unions. I believe Scott's making some pretty good headway, particularly with the police union, but I have not heard an update on their last meeting. What we think, though, is that what we had left in the budget was roughly $300,000. We think that we'll be able to cover the union contracts with that money. That's the intent.
Right now, the balancing process we were at.
Mm-hmm. It was right about 300.
In the good to 300.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. And we need to have at least that much reserved for contracts. Yeah.
And are the schools they're in a contract year too, correct?
Yes. And they did factor in a
Yes.
potential increase in their budget request.
Okay.
Yep.
Sonia, not to pour gasoline on the fire, but how far down the list is the city planner? And for, is the
That's a great question.
Priorities.
I'm not sure. I know that the town planner has been a big item that we've been wanting to get. Also an HR director, that's been a big one too. So yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
But like I said, everything's on the table. So.
OPEB keeps going up.
And OPEB keeps going up.
Oh, yeah, but we're going to be making a lot of money from the marijuana. I mean, we're going to fully fund the budget soon from that, so.
2 years.
No comment.
Any other updates?
No, that's really it. With Scott being out, we haven't had any discussions this week about things. I'm actually not going to be here next week. I'm going to have to be home. My husband's having surgery. So I will be home on baby and husband care duty.
Good luck.
Yes.
Thank you.
Warrant articles.
Warrant articles. Do you want me to pull that back up, actually? We can go through 'em?
That would be great. And if tomorrow you could send those to us.
Sure, I can. They're also out on the website. So, and I'll show everybody how to get there. Let's see.
Dry.
All
So are we
right.
still looking good for April 4th?
Yes, that's still the plan. So when you log into well, not log in, but when you go to the town's webpage, down here in the middle, it says Town Meeting Info. You can click on this, and we have the draft articles here. So we'll start with the special, which we pulled up. We have a placeholder for our snow and ice.
So, real quick favor to ask you. What
Bigger?
percentage for those of us who are sitting, that's good. Anyone else?
So obviously, we don't know yet what our snow and ice total will be. We're still in the middle of it.
We know ballpark where we're at right now.
I don't.
know that
I don't off the top of
we've
my
had a
head.
couple of recent storms.
We're well over it.
They were saying tonight it's probably going to go north of us, but
Oh, I didn't know there was a chance. Yeah.
happened to catch the news
Yeah.
at lunchtime today.
So the DPW and snow plowing payroll is a couple weeks behind. So they work the full week, they submit the timesheets, and then it gets paid. So there's always going to be a delay, at least 2 or 3 weeks after a storm before we really know what the full impact is.
And I know we had one last week. So
Mhm.
we'll
Yeah.
definitely don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's definitely well over what we budgeted, as always. Article 2 is a housekeeping article to clean up some appropriation errors that we had on the annual town meeting last year. This is all for fiscal year 22 appropriations. Obviously, the special town meeting is always for fiscal year 22. And we just had some issues in there that we need to correct to reflect reality.
So this is just the incorrect numbers were shown
Yep.
on the warrant?
Yes.
Excuse me.
So the middle
Warrant
column
for
is,
last year's town meeting.
right, the middle column is what was voted. And this is what we're requesting for the corrections. I think it was an issue of there were too many draft warrants going around and the wrong version got published. It's actually been really helpful with Scott being the only one who's updating the warrant this year, because we don't run into that. We talked about the community preservation, so if you don't mind, I'll just skip through. And our town accountant, Andrew, worked with them to make sure that these were accurate. We have a couple of prior year bills that we need to pay, and so we need to approve them on a town meeting warrant. They're small. So one was we got the bill really late. This one here was the amount that we expected and encumbered was not enough to pay the full bill. We have a placeholder for paid leave buyback. So for a couple of retiring employees and a separating employee, the cost of paying their sick and vacation time when they left are an additional cost to the budget.
And that can be rolled over forever?
These?
Yep.
Only if they're not used for that purpose, but the purpose is continuing. You can continue the appropriation, but for something like this would only apply to those 3 employees. And so next year, if we had any others, we'd have to do a new, right? This is something we've talked about too.
Can they roll over stuff every year?
Which stuff?
I'm sorry, can they roll over paid leave or whatever, time off or
Dep-
vacation?
I'm
It
sure that
depends on the
each of-
contract.
Each of the contracts have different
Mhm.
determinations of what they can roll over, what they can't roll over.
In general,
Stuff.
vacation typically rolls over at a capped amount, so they can carry over. Usually it's 3 weeks, but again, it depends on the contract. Some contracts don't allow it. Sick time is usually carried over until it gets to a very high amount. Personal time is never carried over. And personal time would not be paid out either.
So would that, but if you have so much in the bank and then there's whatever's over, is there a cap on how much you can get paid out?
Again, it depends on the contract. Some contracts do have a dollar amount cap, and others do not. It would be a cap on the number of hours that could be paid out. Number 8, this is a transfer for the sewer force main project. The design and engineering part of the project is not an allowable cost for the DEP and the state revolving fund loan program. And so this is going to be covered instead by the retained earnings in the sewer enterprise account. The reason we need an article here is because the expenses have all been posted to that capital projects fund. We need to have a funding source for it since it's not going to be the state revolving fund. And that's it for special. Right. And then annual town meeting. Article 1 is, like always, going to be the operating budget. We already talked about that. Still evolving. Article 2 is a sick leave buyback for a couple of water department employees. We do not pay water department employees directly. They are paid by the water district. But to use Abington's share of the water enterprise fund, we do have to have a vote to use it. The next few are typically consent agenda items. I imagine they will be again. And these are items that are not controversial. They're usually on every year. People are familiar with them, and they typically are approved. So we like to group them together so that we can vote them once instead of voting each individually. So this first one, Article 3, this figure comes from the school department.
Is it 14,000?
14,560. Yeah, I think last year it was 14.
It's been 14 flat for a long time. It's been inflation.
Yeah, exactly. The health imperative funding, this has been on for years. I have not heard from them. I don't know that Scott has either, but and it hasn't been used the last couple of years, so I don't know. But it's not really something I want to vote to not put on, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If
No,
it's needed.
That's what we've come to each of the last, like at least last year, and I can't remember if the year before, because it's
Right,
very worthwhile.
yeah,
It's not breaking our budget.
exactly.
But-
And same idea for the Arc of South Shore. Article 6 is to officially make the water fund an enterprise fund. Currently, it's technically a special revenue fund, and it's treated just like an enterprise fund, except for our reporting with the state. So this vote would allow us to treat it as an actual enterprise fund. Rockland just voted this last year, so this would actually make a lot of our reporting much easier. And it makes sense. We often refer to it as an enterprise fund anyway because it's treated just like one. Article 7 is to rescind excess authorizations for borrowing for projects that are complete and we no longer need the funds there. We have to keep track of all of our authorized borrowing amounts and what we've used and what we haven't used. So these are all the unused amounts that we want to just kind of get off of the books. Typically, they're coming off because the projects were under budget. You can see the landfill capping. There was a different funding source for part of the project, so we didn't need it all. And then the school project, as we know, we had to vote the full cost of the school, even though MSBA was chipping in over half. And it came in well under budget. The last one is actually an item that we just voted at the last year's meeting. We voted, they came in way under budget. I mean, that project was only $800,000, $775, something like that. Yeah, right. And we're only going to need $660,000. So Johnstone did a fantastic job getting that project done quickly and for a much lower cost.
I have continually heard thanks from the people along both Lincoln and Hamilton Streets.
I can imagine. Yeah. Article 8 is a borrowing authorization. And we have the motion language in here, Matt, if you want to practice. It's your favorite part of town meeting.
I will have plenty of time to practice. I'm not going to practice tonight.
No, I didn't mean tonight.
Yes.
This project is to address the PFAS levels in the drinking water, and Joe LaPointe presented to you all about this situation, so this is not new. We've already discussed this, and Rockland has an identical vote on their town meeting. And there's your motion. Now this one, we'll be going through the Clean Water Trust, the state revolving fund as well. We can get a much better interest rate going through the state's program than if we were to issue our own bonds. We talked about community preservation, so we'll move down. Capital plan funding. So these are the projects that we've put on here. Again, this is still a draft warrant, so I imagine there may be some movement here, especially when we still need to determine what our OPEB contribution may or may not be.
Kind of go through this.
So we have two cruisers and 2 motorcycles for the police department. DPW's projects, I know the hot box is definitely needed. MS4 is required. I don't recall the information about the furnace, but I know it's going to be needed if it's on here.
Now, those cruises, what's the?
We cycle through them, so we typically order 2 or 3 a year.
And when would we think we'd take delivery on those two then?
I don't know. I don't think we've gotten the ones that we ordered for this year. Yeah. Everything's so slow right now with
Right,
supply
yeah.
chain. Yeah. Your guess is as good as mine.
For those,
And I have not an educated guess on it, so I really don't
those who
know.
are newer typically police cruisers are on a 2 to 3-year cycle.
Okay.
If you can
And
get them.
if you can get them, and last year we ended up with 2. I think the year before that, because of COVID, we didn't have.
I don't remember.
I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
We may have skipped a year with cruisers before.
We might have. Well, no, actually, I think we would have because we didn't have any free cash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
Are these capital items voted on separately?
So they're voted on as a group
Mhm.
by the town, but amendments can be made on the floor at town meeting to say, not a big fan of that. But one of the things that we typically do in our deliberations when we go through this is give our feedback on some of them. And so, as Sonia said, this is the capital plan is still very much in flux until we get close to the final.
Right. And Scott's still waiting on the final capital
Yep.
capital planning document,
Yep.
too. So these are placeholders for things that we think are going to be the most important.
So we definitely have the ability now to give feedback on whether or not we think things are appropriate or should be different things.
Yes,
Capital.
absolutely.
Excuse me, Sonia, when you say Scott's waiting on the final, what is that planning?
So
Planning.
they're working with the Collins Center to create a capital plan, and it's supposed to be a very broad, comprehensive plan for all of the capital needs for the town and determining a schedule for, out at least 5 years of what we're going to have coming up, what projects are the top priority, what can we actually fund. That's a key part
Will
too.
that impact any of this?
It could. Mm-hmm.
And Scott's talked to us a couple of times about working with the UMass Collins Center about on that stuff and the grant that we got to work with. Stuff.
And so the capital plan, but the 5-year budget forecast isn't part of,
Correct.
but the capital plan is.
Right, yeah, what the Collins Center is working on now is just the capital plan.
Okay.
Mhm. Yep. Now, the water department, these are all coming out of water receipts reserved.
So that's all coming out of their funds, not out of free cash or the general fund for the town.
I just spoke with him today, too, because we were planning to do $500,000 of ARPA funds for the initial phase of the PFAS mitigation, which we've talked about. We think we're going to be required to have a vote for that 500,000. So I imagine if we can't just add it in here, if we have to reopen the warrant to get it on. We were under the impression we didn't need a vote because it's grant money. You don't need to vote grant money. But Plymouth County's stance is that if ARPA isn't the only funding source, you have to vote it at town meeting. So we need the money, so we'll have to play ball. Sewer department is similar to water. We use sewer retained earnings for their capital items, so this is coming out of the enterprise account. Park and Rec is not an enterprise fund, so these would be free cash. And Park and Rec is part of the DPW. Strawberry Valley is also an enterprise fund.
Building extension. What's the building extension?
I believe the point is to expand the number of kids that they can have in the camp. I think that's the goal.
So for bad weather days, they go inside, kind of a thing.
Possibly.
Yeah, I think it's that, I could be wrong, but I think it's that garage thing that's at the Pine Street or whatever, the Park Street side, and they just want to expand it to make it bigger and maybe less garage-like, is with my understanding, but I could be really misspeaking.
Does anybody know if the gazebo over there is Park and Rec control?
That's a good question.
We have,
Isn't there an issue with the gazebo?
Oh, yeah, it's like,
I think it's in bad
No,
shape.
they-
moved off right
Yeah.
now.
yeah, I'm not sure. I know we've had the gazebo on on different things before, whether it was the capital plan or community preservation. I think community preservation may have done something with the gazebo at one point, but I don't know where things are at with that right now.
It's not very safe there. It's a side topic.
So is there anything in this budget about the gazebo, or are they just gonna keep it fenced off?
I don't know. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to answer that question, so I won't try.
Well, as far as I know about that, no one has presented anything. I don't think it's gone before the CPA or whatever did go before them. They didn't have enough, required a lot of red tape because it's a historical, I don't want to say building, but structure.
Okay.
That has been a suggestion a few times from us, but I don't know that it's gone very far.
Oh, we talked with them about theirs.
Mm-hmm. School department, you remember when we had our conversations with them, that $200,000 that they had in their budget, we were going to move here. That's something that also could maybe possibly be moved back.
Yeah, because right now it's in the budget, correct?
It's right now out of the budget.
Right. Right now it's here
capital
for free cash.
laptops. But it was something that we were saying, because it's probably more of a recurring thing, we would like, our preference would be to get it into the budget so that it's there year after year.
They didn't have a line item in there for,
They did, but we had already pulled it out. It was something that they were presenting to the committee
Oh.
as a need.
but when they presented to us, it was in the budget, I thought.
It might have.
No, I'd already taken out. It was in their,
It might have been in their presentation, but we
Right.
Yes.
talked about it coming out and going into capital.
Okay,
right,
yeah.
yeah.
Because
So on my document, it's
They
out.
were trying to be good about helping the town balance the budget overall.
Mhm.
So
Right.
if we're able to balance it with that in there, that would probably be.
Right.
Yeah, because that was a presentation they did in early January. to the
Correct.
School committee, so
Yeah.
it was in there, but it's
Yes.
since come out. Okay.
Mhm. That's right.
That's a very bad place for that line to come. Town manager, just 52 grand from free cash.
This is still a draft. We'll clean all these up. The classification compensation study is to interview and review all town positions,
Job description.
job descriptions, job titles, what they're actually doing, and comparing compensation to neighboring towns.
We hired somebody?
We've talked with Scott.
It would be, we would have to hire a firm to do this.
Another
Yeah.
RFP?
Yeah, if it's 52,000 possibly. I don't know how many firms do classification studies for municipalities. Probably wouldn't get too many bites on it, but, yeah.
This, again, that statement, question, can you just go on like Monster and they tell you?
No, because those don't usually have municipal positions on them.
Nobody that covers that?
Not that I know of.
It's not as accurate.
Yeah.
$52,000. Actually, sorry, beginning 51. I'll figure it out for everybody.
Talk to Scott.
All right.
All right.
I'm going to write it down. Call Greg.
Great.
Greg is not joking.
I know he's not. The challenge is that, one person here at Town Hall who does their job, a similar position in another town is not doing the same job.
Right.
Because we're all wearing multiple hats, right? And so you never have the same combination of hats on the same people in the other town. So it's a lot of work to compare all of those and then compare the pay, see who's being paid the right amount, who's being paid too low, who's being paid too much. So yeah, they do a lot of work, and there's a particular firm that Scott's familiar with from another town, and they gave a glowing recommendation of the benefit of the study. So that's why it's in here, because there hasn't been a real, what's the word, across the board, comprehensive plan for what people are paid in specific positions. So it's all just kind of, when they come in, we give them a rate. If they, they ask for 2% or whatever, they say they need a raise because other people are getting paid more. It's very person by person, instead of, this is what class your job is in, this is what the job earns. So I think it's needed. Yeah. Scott can talk to you more about that because he definitely has more information. Okay, so that's the capital plan. So those are the enterprise funds and the free cash items. The next one, Matt, I did this for you. This is a borrowing article for all of the other capital projects. So these would be non-debt exclusions, just regular tax levy borrowings, and we're able to put them all in one, so you only have to read the motion once.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That's the part of town meeting where everybody zones out.
I'm still working on that bucket truck, by the way.
We're waiting. We have this as a placeholder here. I guess we should have put a note here, bucket truck, unless Greg pulls through.
No, it's going to be a bucket truck.
So it's still TBD because we're waiting on the library roof amount. So that was that part. Johnstone talked about that. There's part of the project that the town has to pay in order to qualify for the grant funding. So this would be our share just to get it designed, and then the grant funds would be available to us. Article 12 is transferring an unused article from a previous town meeting and repurposing it for a similar use. So it was originally voted as an exterior lift at Frollo. They've since rethought that, and they want to do something totally different. Well, not totally different, but it'll be a ramp instead of a lift. So those funds were not used. Now they're wanting to reappropriate it to do something that they feel will be more appropriate.
Barbara, do you remember?
Yes, Matt.
Do you remember years ago conversations about the Garavanter lift?
I remember many years of
I'm
conversations
having-
about the
I'm
Garavanter.
having flashbacks.
Yes.
I think those started before I was on the committee and went on for about half the time that I've been on. So.
Right. It makes it handicap accessible. However, it's so old that they can't find the parts to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been an ongoing issue. So it sounds like they found an alternative.
Yes.
And is that accessibility, is that just to the school, or will it also allow for the gymnasium?
It's to go from the first floor up to the second floor. It's, Paul, it's over by where Mr. Graham's classroom used to be.
Yeah,
That stairwell
okay.
is they call it a
that one,
Garavanter.
that's the Garavanter,
It's like a chairlift,
Yeah,
but
okay,
a very old version.
yeah, okay.
You know, the ones they have in the houses now. It's like a bigger, older version of that.
Now, these articles are, going forward, we've got our planning and zoning board articles. I'm not going to attempt to explain these. These would be best explained by the planning board, and they're having their hearings now. So I would encourage people to attend those meetings or watch the replays. They're being posted on the town meeting webpage as well. And actually, if I go back here, public hearings. for
I'm
upcoming
sorry,
zoning.
because I'm just thinking, can we get clarification from the school department that is that replacing the Garavanter? 'Cause I'm just trying to picture how a ramp would take the place of you know, how that would work construction-wise.
I don't know the details of where it would be and how it would work, but it
Oh,
would
no,
be.
I'm sorry, Sonia, I didn't mean you. Matt, that was directed to you, or,
You want to reach out?
Paul, are you the
Yeah,
school?
Yeah, yeah, Daniel and I will do
I'm
that.
delegating that to Paul.
Perfect. Just,
Yes.
because I'm just picturing in my mind how you would, you know, you need quite a bit of space for a ramp to not be too much of a slope, and
To not be
like I
like
said,
a
it goes from the
downhill.
first floor to the second floor, I don't know how.
But doesn't that seem
So
like
I
if
could be
it's a
completely
ramp,
wrong, that may be
it'd
for
be-
outside the building, and they're just,
accessible to the Folio School? I don't know, I'll follow up.
Yeah, my impression that it was just to get into the first floor.
Yeah, that's-
And, you know, the first floor with the gym,
Yes.
but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Well, so that's what I was wondering, because if you have events in the gym, the school may not, that part may not be open, so what do we?
Right?
At the Folio,
Right.
you're saying?
That would best be explained by Felicia.
Well, they,
There is still,
so maybe it's that they're putting the Garavanter on the back burner because it's
Pickleball.
been so long trying to get it fixed that maybe the ramp is more necessary with the current use of the building. Paul, that would be my question.
say that again, Barbara?
I'm just wondering if possibly they've decided to put the Garavanter kind of on the back burner because maybe the ramp to get into the building is more necessary right now than the Garavanter, considering what they're using the building for.
All right, I'll follow up.
Thank you.
So for the planning board items that we're skipping over, there's a planning board public hearing March 7th. I'm seeing that on the website. Do we know where?
that be?
It doesn't say. I imagine it'll be here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's usually here. Just as a note for the newer members, typically, not in all cases, but typically the planning board articles don't typically have a financial impact, so we usually defer to the planning board for making recommendations on the articles. If there's one that has or could have a significant financial impact, we'll weigh in on it. In most instances, there are things that are regarding like signage or frontage and things that don't typically have much of a direct financial impact on the town.
So in this one, I think I was just looking at number 13, it's just changing the wording in one of the town
Right.
laws.
There's a lot of amending zoning maps in relation to marijuana, which I think, in the future could have an impact financially for the town.
Why would they even do that? 13, I mean, I know it has nothing to do with money, but why would they change it? Didn't we already vote on it?
For 13, I think it's,
13 is just language, I think.
yeah, it's language.
No, I know, but there's always a reason.
I
Just
think,
like-
I think in that case, if you look, it's replacing dispensary with treatment center.
And I think it's just the terminology has
I know,
changed since.
yeah, last year this,
Really a treatment center? Like, what are we talking about? Like, this is like something
last year, I
that's
think some of the language changes were based on the states, because the
Yes.
state changed
The
their
state-
manuals.
Yeah, the state makes lots of changes to, this is what the wording should be.
Oh, all right, so
and then
that we're being made to do this.
sometimes
I
it's-
don't know.
I don't know for
I don't
this
know.
particular one, but sometimes it's the state is saying you need to change this. Sometimes after we vote for it, even though it's been reviewed beforehand, the town attorneys say, this really should have said that, not this. We.
I don't know, I just
make
think
the
that gives
changes,
it a
so.
pretty weird, that's a weird statement.
They will explain
Yeah,
everything
I don't
at
know.
town
And-
meeting.
Drug treatment
Well,
center around, that's
so
not it.
I don't know if the purpose of changing this is changing just that wording of dispensary to treatment center, or if treatment center as in relation to, actually, it says medical marijuana.
That's what I'm saying, so like, I don't know.
Well,
There are a few others.
But that is to one very specific section of
the bylaws. So it may be that there are other sections with dispensary, and this particular section is related to solely medical marijuana. So, I don't know, but that's what the planning board goes into the details of, which is why we typically defer to them on these
The
things.
pharmaceutical companies make this stuff
So-
now? Is that what we're saying? I don't know, but so, mean,
I think in some cases. So.
Well, it's next
So
Monday.
we're gonna end.
There you go.
Sonia, what's Article 14?
Article 14, I don't know. We can all read it together if we want, but I am not going to comment because I don't have the
This is zoning
information.
maps.
So, do you want me to scroll through these?
I think a quick scroll.
Okay.
Chestnut and Hancock Street. Really bad with directions, but, so you're saying where that blinking light is?
So this is an area that is bounded by Chestnut and Hancock. That's already a multiple-use planning development district. The Muppet District, as it is referred to. for those
Am I
who've
right?
heard
Is
that
that
before.
what the blinking light is?
That's when we were talking with John Stone, what will eventually be a roundabout or a rotary.
Like where the Buddha thing is?
Yes.
What is going on? No, but I'm serious, who's making these things? It's in a neighborhood with houses, what are we doing?
So that is already designated as a multiple use, not a
No, I
residential.
hear
There's
you.
also a convenience store right on the corner.
Well, I know the
there.
convenience
So-
store's there, the lobster barn's
So,
there,
yeah.
like, there's a lot of houses. If you wanna do
I
this.
don't think that was going to be a roundabout, though.
Yeah, I don't know. Who wants this in the neighborhood, other than the 10 people who stood up to have 25 of these things?
Well, that's what the vote is for.
To be honest.
And we have seen, as
Who's putting this on?
we've seen with the planning board, the people bring these to the planning board takes them up and brings
Fix
them.
Main Street,
So,
that's what they should be planning.
all right, 15?
Oh, no, I didn't know.
Monday.
And constitutional requirements. Not financial, 16. At a separate marijuana overlay district. Keep on going. Before Greg loses it, let's move down to
Is there another one? We got woods in my backyard, what's going on?
I think it is. I think this one specifically says in Greg Velazarian's backyard.
In the wetlands.
Yeah.
We can't do anything yet, we can put this in there.
We will create a new zoning district
I just can't even imagine this.
on that one property.
They're gonna be calling it a marijuana hospital soon.
I think we can head down to the next one.
Okay.
And done, MOD.
So again, this is a draft, so we are still waiting on town council to,
And one of the things for the newer members, oftentimes these things will be in here when we get the draft of the warrant and will not make it into the final warrant.
yeah, these notes will not be in the final.
Just wanna make sure.
Not even the notes, sometimes the entire articles are taken.
Oh,
Entire articles
sure.
are taken out.
I just want to make sure my 43-year-old eye saw it correctly. We voted to have 5 locations,
5 licenses,
5 licenses, which would mean 5 locations, most likely, right?
generally.
And did I just see it's delivered on this?
Yeah, there is
I think
something
that's
that is
related. I think that was related to
not retail
the
delivery.
wholesale.
Right.
So that would be sending out to other retail shops. in
Distribution.
other locations, distributing.
Mm-hmm.
Go up?
What you used to get arrested for.
All the time. Where was the one where it said delivery? I just want to... There.
I think other neighboring towns.
Only wholesale.
Delivery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where they are.
We're missing out.
So that was what he was, no, that was what you were talking, in the yellow.
Down?
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry,
In yellow, right there.
the cultivator?
Only be wholesale.
Oh, delivery.
Please advise. Marijuana delivery operator. So this is like wholesale. like-
Directly to consumers.
Yeah.
So like, this is the stuff that
No,
I think...
but,
is-
oh, okay, but the note up here is, not sure we even need this definition, as there will only be wholesale delivery. So this may be
So there
coming
won't
out.
be delivery directly to consumers.
Right, so it's just like from the cultivator to the distributor to the retail.
So maybe that line would get taken out in the final draft or whatever? Right.
Could be,
Presumably.
right. And you know there will be a lot of discussion at town meeting about it.
75 hours worth.
And another thing with the planning board articles, they're very wordy.
Very.
So you can see we've just scrolled through most of the entire warrant in that one article. Probably about
Okay, so the next one is about battery energy storage. I asked Scott about this one. He said these are these giant contraptions that store solar power. Mm-hmm.
What?
solar property.
Like a public lands?
Yeah, so these would be like commercial.
Oh,
This would be like commercial, not like residential.
sorry.
Yeah.
But the amount of solar panels that we put on the residential property would not necessitate that.
Yeah, these batteries are huge.
Do we have that currently? Anything solar?
I know that there was talk of one actually on a property off of Chestnut.
I think this is newer, but it's something that needs to be addressed because I think it's going to be, from what Scott was telling me, it sounds like this is something that's going to become more common. Yeah.
There'll be a lot of language for it.
This is why the lawyers have the life. It just doesn't end.
Can we just go back to OPEB?
It's always a good sign. 18. More planning board amending table of residential use. And less. Special permit. That does not.
What is it for?
Planning definitions.
What were the changes though? I don't think anybody understands any of this stuff. Remember I told you about the last one?
Yeah.
Where like there was 47 of them and nobody understood anything? But then now we can have a lot more multifamily houses put up because of that. Closer to the street or whatever, I don't know, again, there were just so many different things. I just don't think anybody understands what's in it. This one I don't have a clue.
So they're talking about what would be allowed in the highway commercial district.
They usually stand up and speak about it and give an explanation.
Yeah, the last time the explanation was, this is just a wording. If you remember correctly, I mean, I'm not great with words, but that's what the real crux of it was. We're just changing around the wording.
Yeah, they usually explain we're changing it from this to this because of A, B, or C. And if they don't, we can always ask for better clarification so that the residents have a better understanding.
And this does say that they're adding, so I think this might be a new definition.
So I think it's saying.
Specifying the 12
adding
units.
In highway commercial.
You can have larger,
Limits for, or what the definition is for multi-unit dwellings, both less than or greater than 12 units. I'm not sure if this means that if you have an exactly 12 unit, then you're not covered in this, but it looks like they're prohibited in highway commercial for less than 12 units and by special permit for greater than 12 units.
Matt, we can always ask too for an excerpt of the old wording to
Yep.
be given in a handout,
Yep.
if that makes it easier to understand. Sometimes it's, if you can look at what it said before and look at what it's being changed to, it can be easier to have a better understanding of it.
Okay. Daniel's got us peaked. There's 19. What do we have here? Natural tree coverage.
It looks like at the end it's specifically for developers, but
I think it's adding in accordance with town stormwater, bywater management regulations. Changing from trees greater than 5 inches to 6 inches in diameter. The inches of land replace 25% of it.
Okay.
Going down.
Oh, boy. This is where.
Yeah, maybe 30 feet.
I mean, a 30-foot tree is not cheap.
That's a tall tree.
I had that same thought. I think what they mean is when fully mature.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Because then it right below it says 18 inches above ground.
Hmm. Okay.
Like 30 feet high. Big tree.
We've reached the end of our planning.
And I think these are all
Dorset
roadways.
Street roadway, are these the roadways that we skipped over in the last time?
I think so.
Murphy Street, I think we're 3 that we skipped over, so that would make
Yep.
sense.
I think that's it. We did it.
All right. That's not bad. There's going to be a lot of talk on the pot moments, but
Yes.
By the time we get there, there'll be a thing on there, new article for town. Because we need one in every corner.
all right. Anyone have any, close to the mic, anyone have any questions on any of the articles, especially if you were folks this first time running through these? So just so you know, the typical process is we'll go over these. If we have questions on any of these, especially on the financial impact of any of them, we can ask whoever is presenting the article, whoever the petitioner is, to come and talk to us before we make our final recommendation. We will vote on recommendations, whether it is to recommend to approve it, recommend to pass over it, which means we don't want it, or recommend to defer to somebody else, be it the planning board, the zoning board, town manager, whoever. We will vote on each and every warrant article on both the special and annual town meetings. And then at town meeting, we will present our recommendations. As the chairman, I get the joy of going up before the town every year doing that.
So the votes are happening prior to the town meeting, or?
So we will vote on our recommendations. We have to have them published, I believe it's 10 days prior to town meeting.
I'm not sure.
So we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah, we get busy month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have to be done by the 23rd of this month.
Yep.
I don't know what
So
that
I think our
is.
aim was to be done by our meeting on the 16th.
And so the draft needs to not no longer be a draft by then.
Right.
Yep. When is it that the warrant has to be finalized? Barbara, do you remember?
I thought it was 2
14
weeks.
days.
Okay, 2 weeks.
Oh, I'm sorry,
No, it has to be, the warrant has to be final before,
before our recommendation.
yeah.
Well, 14 days. I believe the warrant has to be available 14 days prior to town meeting.
Okay. So we'll get the official word
Yeah,
on when we get
the other
final
thing
line.
too is,
It's definitely tighter this year because we moved town meeting up to early April. Town meeting is usually, or in the years that I've been on, it's been either late May or early June typically, so we're 6 weeks to 2 months ahead of
Right.
where it's been, so.
Yep.
Usually at this point in the process, we have a little more time to take our time on voting on the warrant articles, but looking at this list of warrant articles, I think we've got a pretty good idea on what we have in front of us. So,
Great.
anyone have anything else on the warrant? Did we lose? I think we might have lost the people that were online. So, all right. Well, thankfully we still have a quorum.
I think it's over. So it's connecting.
While we wait, I'll ask if anyone has any liaison reports. Move on to our next section. I actually meant to, but did not go check our mailbox for correspondence. So we don't have any correspondence to report for this week, but next week I will make sure to do that.
We may have like 2 years worth in there,
We
right?
probably do have 2 years worth in there.
Awesome.
Not that that would necessarily be much, but there might be a stack of
What was it?
magazine.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name, but minutes. Russ very studiously prepared minutes back to our November 10th meeting that were distributed to the committee. We have lost Wi-Fi, so we've lost the Zoom, so we've lost Barbara and Chris, so we apologize for that.
It's the Wi-Fi.
Which means, I think, Danny, you weren't on the committee at that point. So we don't have enough people to vote on the minutes.
Couldn't we just call Barbara on the phone?
10th? I don't know how that works.
I'm gonna go with it.
Open meeting law, no, I'm not sure.
I mean, phone, Zoom.
Yeah, I think Zoom is different. Yeah. Well, but we can vote on those minutes next week.
And they are from last year.
They are from November, so I don't think we're losing all that much by waiting another week on them, so. Does anyone have anything else to be brought up for today? All right, our next meeting is next Wednesday, March 9th, again at 7 o'clock, again here in person. We will also continue to have a hybrid option if that's necessary for people. Anyone have any?
Hey, what do we think is going to be on the agenda for next week?
Next week, we will primarily be working on the status of the budget and reviewing the warrant articles. So, no departments coming in, no OPEB discussion, just digging in on finalizing budget and warrant articles. If there are any specific warrant articles that you would like someone to come in to talk to us about, we can work with Sonia to see if we can get maybe a planning board representative or petitioner or one of the departments, if it's a capital item or something, to come in and talk to us.
I think you know the ones I want.
So Sonia, if we could have someone from the planning board, might be Bruce again. Might be Bruce, who was here for community presentation. He's part of the planning board as well. So.
All in.
But yes, we will typically have, so Scott will be back next week. We can find out from him any updates on health imperative or South Shore, whether or not we have heard from them in 3 years, and if we should keep putting them in the warrant. Not sure. We already talked to Water about the PFAS borrowing. Rescinding the excess borrowing is straightforward. Town manager's office, I'm not sure there's much else.
Just, I don't think I've asked this question before, just maybe for people that might listen, just so I understand or they understand. Nothing changed in the level of the water. The actual requirement of what we allow in the water has changed, and so now we have to spend between us and Rockland $26 million.
So to go back to the discussion that we had about this with the water department, the change, so the PFAS chemicals and ingredients that are that get into the water from various sources are things that we have always been working to filter out of the water. In the last year or so, and we're having fun with microphones apparently, in the last year or so, the state of Massachusetts changed the level of what is allowed for PFAS. The EPA, the federal level, the level that is allowed has not changed, and we continue to be consistently well below the federal level, which I think was like 0.7 or something parts per million. The state level changed to 0.2, so it was a pretty significant change.
We're at like 0.21.
And I think what Dan was telling us, Dan Callahan, the water superintendent, was telling us. What was that? Oh, sorry, Joe LaPointe. Flashbacks. Dan retired. What Joe was telling us was that most of the plants providing most of the water to both Abington and Rockland are well below the 0.2, but that one of the plants that primarily services Rockland has been spiking up to 0.21 or 0.23 on occasion, and whenever that happens and it tests at over the amount, they have to inform all of the residents of both communities of that. So, but what part of what they are doing with the 26 million is essentially coming up with a long-term plan for making it maintain below the state level. So they're cleaning things out and putting money towards like dredging and different things that they're doing at the facilities and removal of the PFAS chemicals that are working in the short term, but they're not full long-term solutions. So the water is safe, but they're looking for the long-term solution with this, that we won't have to keep coming year after year of we need to add this to, and we need to dump the sludge and all of that kind of stuff.
And the other reason why I say, obviously it's a big bill, $13 million.
Absolutely.
I want clean water too, so I mean,
Yep.
my kids drink it, I drink it. But I don't know, it's just.
Yeah, it's.
I've read about it a pretty good amount. It doesn't seem like we've done anything at all.
The root of this, the catalyst for all of this is that the state changed the level of what was allowed. and we have to comply with the state, so,
Well, we are complying with the state.
most of the time. Not all of the
If it's
time.
on- I mean,
So-
again, it's gonna sound so rude, but if it's on the Rockland side, whatever Rockland is.
Well, because it's a joint waterworks, so it's the water department has to comply with the state regardless of which town it's going to.
There it's all connected, so.
Yeah, and it could,
Same folks.
and I think he said it's that the treatment plant that has been not always under the .2 mostly provides to Rockland, but some of the water does go to Abington. And if something happened to one of the other plants and that plant had to be down for a while, some of that water would like some of the making up that water would come to Abington in that regard. So it is something that the department as a whole needs to address. It's not easy, unfortunately.
Sorry.
That's okay. No, it's a good question. It's a big bill, so. Other questions, comments, motions?
Second?
A motion to adjourn and a second. Any discussion? Without any, all those in favor of adjourning?
All right?
All those opposed, abstaining? We are adjourned. We will see you next week.